Welcome to Podcast and Business. I am Juan Carlos Giraldo from Boston, United States. Jindan Gong is a research associate at the Stockholm Environment Institute headquarters. She's part of the Energy and Industry Transitions team, Division of Global Agendas, Climate and Systems. Jindan conducts interdisciplinary research on the transition to a fossil-free transport sector, the transitions to fossil-free steel, and off-grid energy and water solutions. In this episode, we discuss what we can learn from past energy crises, the importance of policies, the role of politicians, and how critical are the green stimulus in these times. Hello, Jindan. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. How are you?
I am doing well. It's a pleasure to have you on my podcast to discuss an interesting and critical topic such as energy. In this episode, we will analyze some concepts and context of an article that you wrote and published on the website of the Stockholm Environment Institute entitled Tackling the Energy Crisis, 6 Lessons from Past Crises. To get into the context, Jindan, the energy market crisis caused by the Russia's invasion of Ukraine put the net zero goals on hold for the whole continent, right? I would say the whole world. What are your thoughts about this situation?
Well, I wouldn't necessarily say that the war has put a hold on the net zero goals. I do get where you're coming from, though. If you look at in Europe what's going on, a lot of countries have sought to replace Russian gas supply with investing in new gas fields or in new gas import terminals. And if one focuses on that, it looks quite bad. But again, like if we focus on the energy sector, it can be worth to remember that there are some positive things that have come out of the crisis as well. For example, the Repower EU plan, it's a plan laid out by the European Commission, and it aims to make Europe a bit or not so dependent on Russian fossil fuels, while at the same time tackle the climate crisis. And just some concrete examples of the plan is that it proposes to make amendments to make some of the climate targets more ambitious. For example, it proposes to increase the energy efficiency target of the EU and also to make renewables make up a larger share of the total energy use. But of course, ambitious targets, they sound very nice, but they also need to be put into action.
Exactly. It's incredible how this situation is having an impact in the global energy system, right? The crisis is affecting all countries. But you mentioned something very interesting, is acting. The most important thing, in my opinion, I am no energy expert, is how to act. Like every crisis, in this case, the energy crisis, there are always opportunities to solve and improve, right? So part of the solution, as you mentioned, is renewable and clean energy. So my question is, Jindan, why can this major crisis create a policy window for accelerating clean energy transitions?
I think in general, there is this theory that when crises occur, what happens is that we get a more defined problem to focus on. And it also creates this strong need to find policy ideas to solve this problem in an effective way. And we saw two main reasons why a push for clean energy can be a solution to solve this problem or this crisis. And the first reason is the energy-focused nature of the crisis. Russia's war on Ukraine and the slashing of Russian gas supply, it has exposed how fragile the European energy system is. And it has also shown that there is a great demand for increased energy security. I think that there's a strong opportunity here to make energy infrastructure decisions that can both increase energy security and hopefully also achieve the EU climate goals. And the second reason why we felt that a clean energy transition is relevant in this crisis is the timing of it. It's coming on top of the COVID-19 pandemic, where economies have already been turned upside down. The EU has made recovery plans to emerge stronger from the pandemic, where a green transition has been a key policy area to address. So there is a momentum to latch onto and bring into the recovery of the energy crisis as well.
Exactly. Well, speaking about momentum, to have a meaningful progress in this situation, in my opinion, the role of politicians will be crucial, to focus on what they want. And this involves collaboration between countries, financing, technology between, non-profit and public sector, etc., or private sector as well. For example, a couple of weeks ago, we had the Davos agenda, right, in Switzerland. And I saw John Kerry, the special envoy for the climate in Davos, and he said something very interesting. The main goal is to use and have less coal to reduce emissions. So speaking about this, and in my opinion, is related to ESG, environmental, social, and governance, right? The role of the governments. What are they implementing now, and what are their goals? I would like to know your opinion about this.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of efforts that we have seen during the crisis are also more short-sighted solutions. For example, in Sweden, where I'm from, the government has offered compensations to households that have been affected by high electricity prices. And they have also made tax deductions on petrol and diesel so that people can cope with high fuel prices. And there are many similar kinds of policies in European countries that aim to shield consumers from these price shocks. And I mean, these measures are important for short-term relief, and it's important to help people to cope with energy bills and keep their lights on, but they don't address the root cause of the problem, because people's energy bills, they can't be covered for so long. So I think it's extremely important that politicians make the case for long-term structural changes for a clean energy transition.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think the short term, of course, help to fight the situation just in the moment, but long-term goals are so important to get really the main goal that we are looking for. Speaking about your article and goals, right? What have we learned from previous crises, and how this represents a decarbonization opportunity today? Because, as you mentioned as well, the energy and energy crisis are linked to the post-COVID era as well. What is your opinion about the previous crisis? You share 6 points, which are very, very important. Would you mind to elaborate a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the idea behind this article actually came when me and a colleague were writing another piece on energy efficiency and its role to increase energy security. And there were a lot of studies that show that green recovery policies, such as investments in energy efficiency, are effective in helping economies rebound, in creating jobs, in building towards a greener future. I mean, there is a lot to learn by looking at what has been done in previous crises, what has worked better or not. The 6 lessons that we found can teach us something that, like, what can be worth to consider when designing recovery policies for this crisis. To keep it kind of concise here, these 6 lessons are that it needs to be transparent where the government spending goes and how funds are fully dispersed or not. Green stimulus alone isn't enough. It should be paired with regulatory changes to cut emissions. Another lesson is that the green stimulus should focus on energy efficiency and measures on the demand side so that you fight the problem from different directions. It's also important that these policies should, or the green stimulus should aim to expand existing policies, because if you want to implement new policy programs, it might take longer, it might not be as effective. And for similar reasons, the green stimulus should prioritize proven and scalable technologies that are ready for expansion. And I think last but not least is that it is super important to also take into account the wider benefits of these green policies. And here I'm talking about social benefits, impacts on social equality, and energy security as well.
Yeah, no, it's so important. The green stimulus are critical in these kind of situations. I really like that you present the opportunity that we have. While I was reading some of your source, that for example, in European Union, the consumer electricity prices were like a 35% higher than the last year, something that was insane. Speaking about all these 6 opportunities and all that you present in your article, Jindan, is there anything that you would like to add to, let's see, not to the investors, not to people who work in non-profit, not to people who work in public sector, a listener who is right now in the Pendle Talk that listen this podcast in Stockholm? What would you like to add? What would you like to tell them about this situation?
Well, I would really like to point out that I do acknowledge that the hardship that households and businesses are facing right now, that people are struggling to pay their energy bills and struggling to make their ends meet. And I mean, short term relief is needed. But it is also very important that politicians continue to have this steadfast focus on making the long term changes for a clean energy transition. And it's important to build resilience towards future crises and future price shocks. And that can in turn lead to a more inclusive and equitable energy sector.
Exactly. And I think will create more awareness. I think this crisis, I think bad situations, quoting bad situations, but help us to redesign what is going to happen in the near future on the, you know what I mean?
Absolutely. And I think that, the negative effects that we see in this crisis, they could have been much less severe if we had made more efforts in expanding, for example, energy efficiency or renewables in the past.
Exactly. Jindan, before wrapping up, a question. Where people can reach you or where people can find more information about all these topics that you are sharing with the audience?
There is the Stockholm Environment Institute webpage, SEI for short, where you can read about this and also a lot of the other amazing work that is done here at SEI. Research at SEI Climate, and then, of course, also LinkedIn. I also exist on LinkedIn personally.
That's great. Jindan, I would like to say thank you for your time.
Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, thank you so much. I am Juan Carlos Giraldo from Boston, United States. Thank you so much, everyone.